The distress signal had been broadcasting for 13 standard days before the Galactic Council bothered to convene an emergency session. The transmission fragmented and desperate originated from Vexus, a planet so hostile it hadn't even earned a proper designation beyond Deathworld XR372 in the official records. Urgent assistance required, hostile forces, blockade, biomantle technology at risk. The message played on loop as representatives from 17 species shifted uncomfortably in their anti-grav seats. The council chamber, with its gleaming white surfaces and perfect atmospheric balance, couldn't have been further removed from the hellscape that had sent the plea. High Chancellor Zorn, a cephalian whose tentacular appendages twitched with impatience, finally broke the silence. The Zeri have never requested aid before. Their isolationism is well documented. This situation is unprecedented. Perhaps, offered Ambassador Thrix of the Lumidian Collective, we should dispatch a humanitarian fleet standard protocol for Level 3 distress signals. Calls for... No, interrupted a voice from the entrance of the chamber. All eyes turned to the human delegate, who strode confidently toward the central platform. Ambassador Reeves, Earth's representative, was flanked by a woman whose military bearing was unmistakable, even to alien eyes. Her uniform was midnight black, with minimal insignia, the mark of Earth's Special Operations Division. The Council recognizes Earth's delegation, Zorn announced, unable to hide the note of curiosity in his voice. Honored representatives, Reeves began, what you're hearing is not merely a distress call. It's evidence of a marauder blockade and possible bioweapon research operation. Gasps and clicks of alarm rippled through the chamber. The Marauders, Chancellor Zorn's skin paled. We've had no confirmed Marauder activity in the Orion Arm for decades. Our intelligence suggests otherwise, said the uniformed woman stepping forward. Captain Elena Hart, United Earth Navy. We've been tracking suspicious ship movements near Deathworld systems for months. The pattern is consistent with Marauder tactics, isolate, extract, exploit. A holographic display materialized above the central dais, showing a three-dimensional map of Vexus's star system, with red markers indicating blockade positions. The Marauders aren't just preventing aid from reaching Vexus. Captain Hart continued, her voice steady and authoritative. They're systematically harvesting something the Zeri call biomantle, an organically adaptive substance with remarkable properties. Our scientists believe it could be weaponized. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices and translator devices. Silence. Chancellor Zorn's voice boomed. When order was restored, he fixed his compound eyes on Captain Hart. What exactly does Earth propose? Hart's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not humanitarian aid, Chancellor. A military intervention. Preposterous, huffed the Varaxian delegate. The Council has protocols. Protocols that would send unarmed medical ships into a Marauder trap, Hart countered. No, what Vexus needs isn't bandages and ration packs. They need the UES Vigilant. The holographic display shifted, revealing a sleek vessel, unlike any in the Council's collective naval fleets. Its hull was matte black, absorbing rather than reflecting light with geometric lines that seemed to confuse the eye. Our newest stealth destroyer, Hart explained. Designed specifically to operate in Deathworld conditions. My crew and I can break the blockade, make contact with the Zeri, and stop whatever the Marauders are planning. Chancellor Zorn's appendages curled thoughtfully. Captain Hart, while I appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, sending a warship could be perceived as an escalation. The Council must consider... With respect, Chancellor, Hart interrupted. While the Council considers the Zeri die and the Marauders acquire potentially catastrophic bioweapons, Earth is offering a solution, the only viable solution. A tense silence filled the chamber. The Vigilant can deploy in 12 hours, Hart added. All we need is Council authorization. Chancellor Zorn exchanged looks with the other Council members before releasing a sound like escaping steam, the cephalian equivalent of a sigh. Very well, Captain. The Council grants provisional authorization for this Rescue mission. His emphasis on the word rescue made it clear he understood the true nature of the operation. But know this, if you provoke a full-scale conflict with the Marauders, Earth stands alone. Captain Hart straightened her face, impassive. Understood, Chancellor. Earth is accustomed to standing alone. As she turned to leave, Ambassador Reeves fell into step beside her. That went better than expected, he murmured. They're scared, Hart replied quietly. They should be. If what we suspect about this biomantle is true, the Marauders won't stop with Vexus. Outside the council chambers in the sterile corridor of the space station, Reeves stopped her with a hand on her arm. Elena, I've known you since the Titan campaigns. You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're not telling everything. What's really waiting on Vexus? Captain Hart's eyes hardened. Something worth fighting for, James. Something worth dying for. He studied her face, then nodded once. Good hunting, Captain. We don't hunt, Ambassador, she replied, the ghost of a smile crossing her features. We survive. Earth Command Station hung in geosynchronous orbit above the Atlantic Ocean, its massive ring structure slowly rotating to create artificial gravity. In the station's secure briefing room, Captain Elena Hart stood before her assembled crew, 20 hand-picked men and women whose experiences on humanity's harshest frontiers had forged them into something the rest of the galaxy quietly feared. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, in 4 hours, we embark on Operation Biomantle. She activated the holographic display, showing the same images she had presented to the Council. Our mission has 3 objectives: break the Marauder blockade, make contact with the indigenous Zerii, and prevent the weaponization of their biomantle technology. Lieutenant Ramon Vega, her second-in-command, leaned forward. His weathered face bore the distinctive scarring of someone who had survived Gamma Centauri's radiation storms. What do we know about these Zerii, Captain? Not much, Hart admitted. They're reclusive subterranean and have historically rejected Council membership. What little we do know comes from limited trade exchanges over the past 2 centuries. They're humanoid, adapted to extreme underground conditions, and possess advanced biotechnology that's evolved independently from mainstream galactic science. And this biomantle? Asked Chief Engineer Malik Zhao. Unlike most of the crew whose physical modifications were medical necessities after surviving harsh environments, Zhao's augmentations were voluntary cybernetic enhancements that allowed him to interface directly with ship systems. Hart nodded to a woman seated at the far end of the table. Dr. Sana Iyer can answer that better than I can. Dr. Iyer stood, her movements fluid, despite the exoskeletal braces visible beneath her uniform remnants of a gravity well accident on Europa. The biomantle appears to be a semi-sentient organic substance that adapts to and enhances its environment, she explained. Initial samples smuggled out by Zerii traders suggest it can be programmed at the molecular level for various applications, from medical regeneration to structural reinforcement. Or biological warfare, added Hart grimly. Intelligence suggests the Marauders have been capturing Zerii scientists for months, forcing them to weaponize the biomantle. Silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Our ship? Asked Weapons Officer Kira Nomura, her artificial eyes glinting in the low light. Hart smiled for the first time. The UES Vigilant is unlike anything in Earth's fleet, or the Council's for that matter. Stealth capabilities beyond current detection technology, adaptive hull composites, and weapon systems specifically designed to function in extreme environments. She expanded the holographic display, revealing the ship's schematics. The Vigilant can withstand acid storms, radiation spikes, gravitational anomalies, all the pleasant features of a death world like Vexus. But more importantly, her voice lowered slightly. It's crewed exclusively by Deathworld veterans, us. She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes, natural and artificial alike. The Council sees us as brutish, primitive, dangerous. The Marauders see us as naive, idealistic, weak. Both are wrong. We are what our world made us, survivors. And now we're going to teach the Marauders what that really means. Lieutenant Vega straightened in his chair. When you put it that way, Captain, it almost sounds like fun. A ripple of dark laughter spread through the room. Make no mistake, Hart cautioned. This mission carries significant risks. The Council has made it clear that if we fail, Earth stands alone against any marauder retaliation. So, business as usual then, quipped Communications Officer Farah Nasser, drawing another round of chuckles. Hart allowed herself a small smile. Report to your stations. Final briefings at 1800. Deployment at 2000. Dismissed. As the crew filed out, Dr. Iyer lingered behind. Captain, may I speak freely? Hart nodded. Always, Doctor. I've been studying everything we have on the Zeri physiology and culture. They're extraordinarily cautious with outsiders' evolutionary adaptation to their harsh environment. When we arrive, they may see us as just another threat. Your recommendation? Iyer hesitated. I believe I should be part of the first contact team. My background in xenobiology might help bridge the gap. Hart studied the scientist carefully. Iyer had joined Earth's military science division after her accident, driven by a desire to understand extreme environments and the life forms that thrived in them. Her insights had proven invaluable during the Titan campaigns. Granted, Hart decided, but you'll undergo combat refresher training during our transit. Vexus won't be forgiving of mistakes. Understood, Captain. Thank you. Iyer turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing, the Zeri message mentioned the biomantle was at risk. Not that it was being stolen or weaponized, but specifically, at risk. That choice of words suggests they view it as something alive, not just a technology. Hart considered this. Noted, Doctor. See if you can find any cultural references that might explain that perspective. It could be important when we make contact. After Iyer left, Hart remained alone in the briefing room, studying the holographic image of Vexus, a planet wrapped in swirling storms and bathed in lethal radiation. Somewhere beneath that hellish surface, an entire civilization was fighting for survival against an enemy that saw them as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. It was a story humanity knew all too well. The UES Vigilant slipped out of Earth's orbital defense grid with minimal fanfare, a shadow among shadows, its stealth systems already engaged. Inside the bridge, Captain Hart settled into the command chair as her crew worked with practiced efficiency around her. FTL Drive, Charging Captain, reported Lieutenant Vega from the navigation console. Jump coordinates locked for the Orion Cygnus transit corridor. Time to jump threshold. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Hart nodded and opened the shipwide comm. All hands, this is the captain. Secure for FTL transit. We're about to venture where few council ships have gone willingly, into Deathworld territory. Our mission is clear, our purpose just. The people of Vexus didn't ask for saviors or politicians, they asked for help. We will provide it. Hard out. She closed the channel and glanced at Vega. Status of our council observer. A flicker of amusement crossed Vega's features. Ambassador Kell is secured in his quarters, Captain. He seems apprehensive. As he should be, Hart replied. The Arcadian diplomat had been a last-minute addition, the Council's eyes and ears on the mission. His aquatic species was particularly ill-suited for the conditions they were heading into. Make sure he stays confined to the designated safe zones once we reach Vexus. I won't risk the mission to accommodate political sensibilities. Understood. FTL Drive at full charge, announced Zhao from engineering. Ready to jump on your command. Hart straightened in her chair. Execute jump. The stars outside the view screen stretched into lines, then vanished altogether as the Vigilant plunged into the dimensional rift of faster-than-light travel. For 5 days, the ship hurtled through the void between stars. The crew used the time to prepare running combat simulations, studying what little information existed about Vexus and its native Zerii, and fine-tuning the ship's systems for the extreme conditions ahead. On the 5th day, Dr. Iyer requested a meeting with Captain Hart in the ship's laboratory. I've been analyzing the fragmentary transmissions from Vexus, she explained, gesturing to a display showing waveform patterns. There's something embedded in the signal, a secondary data stream encoded within the distress call. Hart frowned. Encrypted information. Not exactly. Ayer manipulated the display, isolating a particular pattern. It's biological data, specifically molecular structures of the biomantle. They sent us their research. Why? I believe, Ayer said carefully. They sent us instructions. The molecular sequences appear to be arranged in a specific pattern that could allow for synthesis under controlled conditions. Hart's eyes narrowed. Are you saying the Zeri gave us the blueprint for their most valuable technology? That seems unlikely for a species known for their secrecy. Unless they believed the technology would be lost otherwise, Ayer pointed out. This could be their version of a dead man's switch, ensuring their discovery survives, even if they don't. Hart considered this in silence for a moment. Can you reproduce it? Theoretically, yes, with the right base materials and environment. The ship's fabrication systems could be modified to do it, Hart decided. Quietly. Work with Zhao. If this biomantle is as valuable as everyone seems to think, having our own sample might prove useful. Captain, Ayer hesitated. If I'm interpreting the data correctly, this isn't just a technology. It's at least partially alive, a symbiotic biomechanical entity. Creating it comes with ethical considerations. Hart met her gaze steadily. Noted, Doctor. But I'd rather have it and not need it than find ourselves outmatched by whatever the Marauders are developing. Proceed with caution, but proceed. 12 hours later, the Vigilant emerged from FTL at the edge of the Vexus system sensors, immediately scanning for signs of the Marauder blockade. Multiple vessel signatures detected, reported Tactical Officer Wei. 7 ships in standard blockade formation around Vexus. Their energy signatures match known Marauder configurations. Hart studied the tactical display. Classification: 4 Corvette-class patrol vessels, 2 cruisers, and 1 Dreadnought-class command ship. The Dreadnought is designated Harvester, according to our intelligence database. Any sign they've detected us? Wei shook his head. Negative, Captain. Stealth systems functioning at optimal capacity. We're completely invisible to conventional sensors. Good. Hart nodded. Maintain distance. I want a complete analysis of their patrol patterns before we make our move. Lieutenant Vega set course for the dark side of Vexus's third moon. We'll use it for cover while we finalize our approach strategy. Aye, Captain. As the Vigilant silently maneuvered into position, Ambassador Kell entered the bridge, his translucent skin flushed with anxiety. Captain Hart, he began, voice quavering. I must insist on being informed of your intentions. The Council authorized a rescue mission, not a military engagement with the Marauders. Hart didn't take her eyes off the tactical display. Ambassador, my orders are to break the blockade, make contact with the Zerii, and prevent the weaponization of biomantle technology. To accomplish any of those objectives, we must first deal with the Marauder presence. Surely there are diplomatic channels? With all due respect, Ambassador Hart turned to face him. The Marauders aren't known for their diplomatic flexibility. They're pirates and opportunists who operate outside Council jurisdiction. If you have a magical frequency that will make them stand down, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I have a mission to plan. Kell's gill flaps pulsed with indignation. I will note your insubordination in my report. Note whatever you wish, Hart replied evenly. But remember that when this mission is over, you'll want to be on the right side of history. Now, unless you have tactical insights to offer, I suggest you return to your quarters. After Kell's huffy departure, Vega moved closer to Hart. You really think the Council expects this to succeed? They've never authorized military action against the Marauders before. Hart's expression darkened. The Council authorized this mission because they're terrified of what the Marauders might develop with the biomantle. But they're equally terrified of what humanity might do with a free hand in interstellar affairs. This mission is designed to fail Ramon. Either we're destroyed by the Marauders, or we succeed, but violate enough protocols to justify sanctions against Earth. A no-win scenario, Vega muttered. Only if you play by their rules, Hart replied with a grim smile. Humanity has faced extinction-level events on our own world enough times to recognize when someone's stacked the deck. We're not here to satisfy the Council's political agenda. We're here to save lives and protect both Earth and the galaxy from a genuine threat. 6 hours later, the senior officers gathered in the tactical room to review Hart's plan. The Marauder patrol patterns leave a 3-minute window here. She indicated a sector near Vexus's northern hemisphere. Their sensor grid has a blind spot created by the planet's radiation belt. We'll use our stealth systems and the radiation cover to slip past the blockade. And once we're through, asked Kira Nomura. We make contact with the Zeri, Hart replied. According to the little information we have, their main settlements are located in vast underground cave systems. The surface is too hostile for permanent habitation. Which means we need to find an entrance, Vega concluded. Hart nodded. Exactly. The distress signal originated from this region. She highlighted an area on the planet's surface map. Satellite imagery from Council archives shows unusual formations that could indicate artificial structures. We'll start there. What about the Marauders? Wei asked. Once we're planetside, the Vigilant will be vulnerable. The ship won't be landing, Hart clarified. We'll maintain high orbit on the far side from the blockade, using the planet's radiation belt for cover. A small team will deploy via drop pods to the surface. She looked around the table. Vega will command the ship in my absence. I'll lead the ground team consisting of Nomura Zhao, Dr. Ear, and a security detail. Captain, Vega objected. Protocol dictates that you should remain with the ship while... This isn't a standard deployment, Lieutenant Hart cut him off. The Zeri will be suspicious of outsiders. They need to see that we're serious enough to send our commanding officer. Besides, she added with a cold smile, I didn't come all this way to sit in orbit while others have all the fun. The assembled officers exchanged glances, but no one else raised objections. One more thing, Hart continued. Dr. Iyer and Chief Zhao have been working on something that might give us an advantage. She nodded to Iyer. The scientist activated a small containment field on the table. Within it floated a translucent, slightly pulsating substance, neither fully solid nor liquid. Using the data encoded in the Zeri transmission, we've synthesized a small sample of what we believe is biomantle, Iyer explained. It's in a dormant state currently, but preliminary tests suggest it responds to specific electromagnetic frequencies and can be programmed for various applications. Zhao picked up the explanation. We've modified a set of tactical gear with interfaces that should allow the biomantle to integrate with our systems. In theory, it could enhance our protective capabilities, allowing us to better withstand Vexus's environmental hazards. The officers stared at the floating substance with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Has it been field tested? Vega asked skeptically. There hasn't been time, Iyer admitted. And to be frank, Lieutenant, there's no way to fully test something like this without deploying it in actual conditions. The biomantle is adaptive. It responds to its environment in ways we can't fully predict in a laboratory setting. Which is why I'll be the first to use it, Hart stated firmly. If there are risks, I'll take them before asking any of you to do the same. Captain, I must object, Iyer said. As the scientific lead on this project... Objection noted, Doctor, Hart interrupted. But my decision stands. Prepare the equipment for deployment in 6 hours. She looked around the table once more. This mission walks the line between diplomacy and warfare science and survival. I chose each of you because you understand that line better than most. Trust your training, trust each other, and remember what we're fighting for. The meeting adjourned and the officers dispersed to prepare for their roles in the mission. Hart remained behind, studying the tactical display and the swirling, violent atmosphere of Vexus below. Somewhere on that hostile world, an entire species waited for salvation. But Hart knew better than most that salvation rarely came without sacrifice. The question wasn't whether there would be a price to pay, only who would pay it, and whether the cost would be worth the outcome. Either way, in just a few hours, the UES Vigilant would challenge the Marauder blockade, and humanity would once again step into the crucible of a death world, not as victims or conquerors, but as equals to those who had learned the same harsh lessons of survival. The drop pod plummeted through Vexus's turbulent atmosphere, its heat shields glowing white-hot as acid rain and electrical discharges battered the exterior. Inside, Captain Hart and her four-person team were strapped into impact seats, faces illuminated by the red emergency lighting. "Atmospheric interference is scrambling our comms," reported Nomura, checking her tactical display. "We'll be out of contact with the Vigilant until we reach the surface." Hart nodded, feeling the deep vibration of the pod as it fought against the planet's violent weather patterns. Status of the biomantle interface. Dr. Ayer glanced at the readouts on her wrist console. Stable, but dormant. It should activate fully once we're exposed to the planet's environment. The pod lurched suddenly, throwing them against their restraints. "Lightning strike," called out Security Officer Jackson. "Deflection shields at 60%. "Compensating," Zhao replied calmly, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Adjusting descent vector." Hart felt a momentary weightlessness as the pod altered course. Then, the crushing pressure returned. Through the small viewports, she caught glimpses of Vexus's hellish landscape, rocky terrain illuminated by flashes of lightning, with rivers of glowing caustic liquid cutting through the darkness. "Impact in 30 seconds, Zhao announced. "Brace for landing." The pod's retrothrusters fired, slowing their descent enough to prevent catastrophic damage, but not enough for comfort. When they hit, it was like colliding with a concrete wall. Safety harnesses strained equipment rattled loose, and for a moment, Hart saw stars behind her eyelids. Then, stillness broken only by the howl of wind outside and the hiss of the pod's compromised seals. "Status report," Hart demanded, already unbuckling her harness. "Minor injuries only," Ayer responded, running a medical scanner over each team member. "The biomantle in our suits absorbed most of the impact stress. Landing zone is approximately 2 kilometers from the target coordinates," Zhao added, consulting his navigation system. "Atmospheric conditions diverted us slightly north." Hart accessed the external cameras. The landscape outside was a nightmare of sharp, angular rock formations, under a sky that boiled with toxic clouds. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated pools of glowing liquid that steamed and bubbled. "Atmospheric toxicity?" she asked. "Off the charts," Ayer confirmed. "The suits will protect us, but extended exposure is not recommended. The good news is that the radiation levels are consistent with our intelligence high, but within the tolerance range of our equipment." Hart made her decision. "Seal your helmets. We deploy in 2 minutes. Minimal equipment, weapons, medical supplies, communication gear. Zhao, set the pod's self-destruct for remote activation. If we can't return to it, I don't want it falling into marauder hands." The team moved with practiced efficiency, checking each other's seals and equipment. When Hart's helmet locked into place, her HUD activated, displaying environmental readings and team status indicators. "Biomantle interface initializing." Ayer's voice came through the comm system. "Captain, you should feel the integration beginning." Hart did feel it, a strange, almost liquid sensation that spread from the specially designed panels on her suit. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was undeniably alien, a living presence that seemed to be mapping her nervous system, learning her body's responses. "Confirmed," she replied. "It feels aware." "That's by design," Ayer explained. "The biomantle forms a semi-symbiotic relationship with its host. It's responding to your physiological state and adapting to protect you." Before Hart could respond, the suit's external sensors detected movement. "We've got company," Nomura warned, her weapon already raised. "Multiple contacts approaching from the southeast. Not reading any technology signatures, could be indigenous life forms." "Or Zeri," Ayer suggested. "Their biotechnology wouldn't register on our standard scans." "Defensive positions," Hart ordered. "Nobody fires unless I give the command. Dr. Ayer, stand ready to attempt communication." They moved out of the pod, taking cover behind nearby rock formations. The acid rain sizzled against their suits, but the biomantle responded instantly, forming an additional protective layer that repelled the caustic droplets. Through the swirling mists and rain, Hart caught glimpses of movement figures approaching with uncanny grace, despite the treacherous terrain. They were humanoid, but moved with a fluid, almost insect-like precision. Captain Ayer's voice was hushed with amazement. "Those are definitely Zeri." The figures came closer, and Hart could now see them clearly through her visor. They stood slightly shorter than humans, with elongated limbs and iridescent skin that shifted colors in response to their environment. Their eyes were large and multifaceted, adapted for the dim light of their underground habitats. They wore no protective gear despite the hostile conditions, yet seemed completely unaffected by the acid rain and toxic atmosphere. How are they surviving without protection? Zhao wondered aloud. Look closely, Ayer replied. Their skin, its biomantle. They've integrated it completely into their biology. The Zeri stopped approximately 20 meters away, forming a semicircle. One stepped forward, raising a hand in what could have been either greeting or warning. Hart straightened and stepped out from behind cover, her weapon lowered but accessible. I am Captain Elena Hart of the United Earthship Vigilant. We received your distress call and have come to offer assistance. For several tense moments, there was no response. Then the lead Zeri made a series of clicking sounds, followed by words in heavily accented but understandable galactic standard. You are not Council. Council sends words, not warriors. The Zeri's multifaceted eyes studied Hart intently. Why does Earth interfere in matters beyond its sphere? We intercepted your distress call, Hart replied. You mentioned the biomantle was at risk. We know the Marauders have blockaded your planet and are forcing your scientists to weaponize your technology. The Zeri conferred among themselves with rapid clicks and whistles before the leader addressed Hart again. You know of biomantle, yet you wear it like dead skin. You understand nothing. There was clear disdain in the alien's voice. Follow if you wish answers. Stay if you wish death. The storms grow stronger. Without waiting for a response, the Zeri turned and began moving with startling speed across the treacherous landscape. Captain Nomura questioned, weapons still ready. We follow, Hart decided. Stay alert. This could still be a trap. The team fell into formation behind Hart, struggling to match the Zeri's pace across the uneven terrain. The aliens moved with perfect adaptation to their environment, seeming to anticipate where acid pools would form or where lightning would strike. After nearly an hour of punishing travel, they reached what appeared to be a sheer cliff face. The lead Zeri placed a hand against the rock, and a section of it rippled like water, revealing an entrance to a tunnel that sloped sharply downward. The surface grows too dangerous, the Zeri explained. We descend to the deep halls. Hart hesitated only briefly before nodding to her team. We proceed as invited. Zhao maintain an open channel to the Vigilant in case we regain communications once we're through the interference. The tunnel beyond the entrance was unlike anything Hart had expected. Rather than crude excavations or even sophisticated engineering, the passageways appeared to have been grown walls of living tissue that pulsed with bioluminescent light and occasionally shifted to widen or narrow the path. It's all biomantle, Ayer whispered in awe. The entire structure is alive. Their Zeri guides led them deeper through a maze of tunnels that gradually opened into larger caverns. The air grew warmer and surprisingly fresh, with none of the toxic elements that made the surface uninhabitable. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground city, a sprawling network of organic structures that curved and flowed in seemingly impossible architectural patterns. Thousands of Zeri moved through the space, some gliding along what appeared to be living transportation conduits, others tending to structures that grew and changed, even as Hart watched. Welcome to Zinvaral, announced their guide. The last deep city. Last, Hart questioned. The Zeri's color shifted to a deep blue, an expression of sorrow, Hart guessed. Once many deep cities thrived beneath Vexus's skin. Now only Zinvaral remains. The others have fallen to the Harvesters. Hart exchanged glances with her team. The Marauder ship is called the Harvester. Not ship, the Zeri corrected. Beings. Those who take without understanding. Those who kill without reverence. The alien gestured for them to follow again. Come. The elders will speak with you. They were led through the city, drawing curious and sometimes hostile stares from the Zeri residents. Hart noted defensive positions, weapon emplacements disguised as organic growths, and what appeared to be evacuation routes, signs of a civilization preparing for invasion. The central chamber of Zinvaral was a cathedral-like space, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. At its center stood a circular platform surrounded by what looked like living root systems that extended throughout the chamber. Seated on organic thrones were 7 elderly Zeri, their skin patterns more complex and vibrant than those of their younger counterparts. "The human captain approaches," announced their guide, bowing deeply. The eldest of the council rose, eyes fixed on Hart, with an intensity that made her skin prickle beneath the biomantle-enhanced suit. "I am Zervan, Voice of the Deep," the elder introduced himself. "You wear our gift as armor, yet understand not its nature. Why have you come, human captain?" Hart stepped forward, removing her helmet, as a sign of respect and trust. "To help, elder. The Marauders blockade your world and hunt your people. We have come to break that blockade and protect the biomantle from weaponization." Zervan's skin rippled with patterns that Hart couldn't interpret. "Protect your kind seeks to protect what you yourselves would weaponize. We see the integration technology you wear. Already you bend the biomantle to military purpose." Hart felt a flash of guilt, but held her ground. "We synthesized a sample based on the data embedded in your distress signal. We needed to understand what we were defending. The signal was not meant for you," another elder interjected, her voice crackling with age. "It was meant for those who already understand the sacred bond." "Yet they came," Zervan noted. "When the council sent only empty promises, Earth sent warriors." He descended from his throne, approaching Hart with careful, measured steps. "Show me your true purpose, human captain. The biomantle you wear connects you to our understanding. It will reveal your deception or confirm your honor." Before Hart could respond, Zervan reached out and placed a hand on her cheek. The contact was electric, not painful, but overwhelming. The biomantle in her suit responded instantly, spreading upward to cover her face in a thin, translucent layer. Hart gasped, as her mind filled with alien sensations and fragmented images, vast underground networks, the constant rhythm of Vexus's geological heartbeat. The collective consciousness of a species evolved to survive in perfect harmony with the most hostile environment imaginable. And beneath it all, terror, the systematic destruction of deep cities, the harvesting of biomantle and its living cultivators, the Marauders' cruel experiments as they sought to transform a symbiotic life form into a weapon of unprecedented destruction. When Zervan withdrew his hand, Hart staggered backward, supported by Dr. Iyer. "Captain," Iyer asked worriedly, "are you all right?" Hart blinked, her vision clearing slowly. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. She looked up at Zervan, newfound understanding in her eyes. "The biomantle isn't just technology. It's your partner species, a symbiotic life form you've evolved alongside for millennia." Zervan's skin shifted to a warm, amber approval. "The human captain learns quickly. Yes, the mantle beings have shared our world since the beginning. They protect us from Vexus's wrath. We provide the direction their consciousness craves. Together, we have built a civilization in harmony with a world that seeks our destruction. And the Marauders are breaking that harmony," Hart concluded. "They're harvesting the biomantle organisms, but keeping them in a state of semi-consciousness, enough to utilize their adaptive properties, but not enough to allow full symbiosis. Worse," Zervan's color darkened. "They corrupt the connection, forcing the mantle beings to become weapons poisons that consume rather than protect. The pain of this perversion echoes through all biomantle, even that which you wear. Soon, the harvesters will perfect their method. When they do, no world will be safe. Hart straightened her resolve, hardening. Then we stop them, now, while we still can. Bold words, commented another elder skeptically. But your ship is one against many, and the harvesters have had time to study our defenses. What can Earth offer that might turn this tide? Something the Marauders don't expect, Hart replied. A direct alliance with the Zerii. Not council mediation, not diplomatic posturing, a straightforward military partnership between our peoples. The elders conferred among themselves in their clicking language before Zervan responded. For generations, we have kept ourselves apart from galactic affairs. The surface dwellers bring only exploitation and misunderstanding. Why should we trust humans when your world is so different from ours? Hart smiled grimly. Because we're more alike than you think. Earth is considered a death world by council standards. Our gravity, our predators, our natural disasters, they shaped us into survivors, just as Vexus shaped you. We understand what it means to adapt or die, and we understand the value of symbiosis. She gestured to her team. Every officer here has survived conditions that would kill most council species. Lieutenant Nomura lived through the New Madrid earthquake swarms. Chief Zhao endured the lunar dust plague. Dr. Ayer survived a gravity well collapse on Europa. We were forged by adversity, just as you were. Zervan studied her thoughtfully. Words are easily spoken, human captain. What do you propose that might demonstrate this kinship? A joint operation, Hart said without hesitation. We combine your knowledge of the biomantle with our military capabilities. The Vigilant can break the blockade from above, while your forces strike from below. And, she added, we can offer something the Marauders don't expect, a fully integrated biomantle weapon system. Dr. Ayer stepped forward. Captain, the synthesis process is still experimental. We haven't tested it under combat conditions. No time like the present, Doctor, Hart replied. She turned back to Zervan. With your guidance, we can perfect the integration. The Marauders are using corrupted, enslaved biomantle. We'll use willing symbiotic partnership the way it was meant to be. The Elder Council deliberated again, this time for longer. Finally, Zervan approached Hart once more. The human captain proposes a path of great risk. Many may die human and Zeri alike. Many are already dying, Hart countered, and more will follow if the Marauders succeed. Yes, Zervan acknowledged, which is why we will accept your alliance, human captain. Not for the Council, not for Earth, but for the mantle beings who suffer under Harvester corruption. We will show you our ways, and you will show us yours. Together, perhaps we can preserve what remains of our world. He gestured, and the biomantle in Hart's suit responded, forming intricate patterns that mirrored those on his skin. The bond is acknowledged, Zervan declared. Now let us plan this joint operation. For the next 12 hours, the Vigilance team worked alongside Zeri specialists in a chamber deep within Zinvaral. The space had been adapted into a war room, with holographic displays showing Marauder positions and detailed schematics of the underground tunnel systems that extended far beyond the city itself. The Harvesters have established extraction facilities here, and here, explained Tierlen, the Zeri military commander, indicating positions on the map. They drill down from the surface, establish containment fields, and harvest both the biomantle and our people. Hart studied the display grimly. How many Zeri have they captured? Over 3,000, Tierlen replied, skin flickering with patterns of rage and grief. Mostly scientists and cultivators, those with the deepest connection to the mantle beings. Dr. Ayer, who had been working closely with Zeri biologists to refine their understanding of the biomantle, joined them at the tactical display. We've made a breakthrough, she announced. The Zeri have shown me how to communicate more effectively with the biomantle organisms. They're not just responsive, they're intelligent in a distributed collective way. And they're angry. Can that anger be focused? Hart asked. I believe so, Ayer nodded. The Zeri cultivators have been teaching me their bonding techniques. With their help, I've modified our prototype integration system. The biomantle won't just protect us now, it will actively fight against its corrupted counterparts. Hart turned to Tierlen. How soon can your forces be ready to move? We have 500 warriors prepared for surface combat, the Zeri commander replied. They await only the signal. And the tunnel system. You're certain it extends beneath the Marauder extraction points? Certain, Tierlen confirmed. Though they have placed detection grids to prevent incursion. We cannot approach without alerting them. Unless they're distracted, Hart mused. She activated her comms link to the Vigilant, which had maintained high orbit on the far side of Vexus from the Marauder blockade. Lieutenant Vega status report. Vega's voice came through with minimal static. Holding position, Captain. The Marauders haven't detected us yet, but they've increased patrol activity in the last 4 hours. Something's got them on edge. Probably us, Hart replied. How quickly can you bring the ship into attack position? 20 minutes from your signal, Vega answered. But Captain, direct engagement with the Marauder fleet puts us at a significant disadvantage. 7-1 aren't odds I'd recommend. We won't be engaging the full fleet, Hart explained. Just creating a diversion. I'm sending you targeting coordinates for the 3 primary extraction facilities. Hit them with precision strikes, then pull back to high orbit. The goal is to draw their attention and defensive resources, not to stand and fight. Understood, and the Council observer? Hart had almost forgotten about Ambassador Kell. Keep him secure and in the dark. This operation exceeds our Council mandate, and I don't want interference. Aye, Captain. He's been rather seasick anyway. Something about Vexus's gravitation affecting his aquatic adaptations. He hasn't left his quarters since we arrived. Small mercies, Hart remarked dryly. Prepare the ship, Lieutenant. We move in 6 hours. After ending the communication, Hart turned back to the assembled planning team. We need to coordinate the timing precisely. The Vigilant strikes first, drawing Marauder forces to defend their extraction facilities. As they redirect resources, we launch a ground assault through the tunnels, targeting their central research facility, where they're developing the weaponized biomantle. And the blockade ships? Asked Nomura. They'll detect the Vigilant as soon as it attacks, Hart acknowledged. Which is why we need to neutralize their command ship, the Dreadnought Harvester. Without centralized direction, the blockade will be far less effective. That ship is heavily defended, Zhao pointed out. Even with surprise on our side, the Vigilant can't take on a Dreadnought alone. We won't be alone, Hart replied, glancing at Tierlen. Show them. The Zeri commander manipulated the holographic display, revealing a complex network beneath the planet's surface. The mantle network extends throughout Vexus's crust, he explained. The harvesters do not realize that what they drill into is not just rock, but a living system. We can trigger a coordinated response, a planetary-scale defense mechanism. What kind of defense mechanism? Zhao asked skeptically. The details would be difficult to translate, Tierlen admitted. But imagine thousands of biomantle organisms connected in a neural network that spans the planet, simultaneously redirecting Vexus's geothermal and electromagnetic energies. Dr. Ayer's eyes widened with understanding. A controlled tectonic event, you can actually direct the planet's geological forces? To a limited degree, yes, Tierlen confirmed. Enough to create a significant energy surge beneath the Harvester's current position. Their shields are designed to repel weapons fire, not a focused geothermal eruption. Hart nodded, slowly, impressed despite herself. That could work. The Vigilant strikes the extraction points, the Harvester moves to respond, and your planetary defense activates when they're in position. There's more, Dr. Ayer added. The biomantle sample we've been developing in the lab with proper cultivation, it could be expanded and programmed specifically to counter the weaponized strains the Marauders have created. An antidote, Hart questioned. More like an immune response, Ayer clarified. If delivered to their central research facility, it could neutralize their bioweapons before they can be deployed. Hart considered the full plan, analyzing possible points of failure and contingencies. It was risky, depending on untested technology and coordination between forces that had never worked together before. But the alternative was allowing the Marauders to perfect a bioweapon that could threaten the entire galaxy. "We proceed," she decided finally. "Chief Zhao will coordinate with the Vigilant for the precision strikes. Dr. Ayer will finalize the biomantle countermeasure with the Zeri cultivators. Lieutenant Nomura will lead the security team that escorts Dr. Ayer to the research facility. I'll coordinate with Tierlen on the timing of the planetary defense mechanism." She looked around at the assembled team, human and Zeri, working side by side, Deathworlders united by a common threat and a shared determination to survive. "This operation begins in 6 hours. Get some rest if you can. When we move, we'll need to be at our best." As the others dispersed to their assigned preparations, Tierlen approached Hart privately. "Human Captain, there is something you should know," the Zeri commander said quietly. "The planetary defense mechanism, it requires a significant sacrifice. The cultivators who direct it must form a deep bond with the mantle network, one that cannot be severed without great harm." Hart frowned. "What kind of harm?" "Death, most likely," Tierlen stated simply. "Or worse, a fractured consciousness trapped between flesh and mantle. Our volunteers understand this cost." Hart felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "And you were going to mention this when exactly?" "Now," Tierlen replied, unperturbed by her anger. "Before you commit your people to a plan that demands sacrifice from mine. Would you have done differently in my position, Human Captain? Would you have revealed your most desperate measures before knowing if alliance was possible?" After a moment, Hart sighed. "No, I wouldn't have. But now that we are allied, no more secrets between us. The cost is too high for misunderstandings." "Agreed," the Zeri inclined his head. "Though I suspect humans keep secrets even from their closest allies." "Not this human," Hart replied firmly. "Not today, at least." The UES Vigilant broke from its hiding position, exactly on schedule, thrusters flaring as it accelerated toward Vexus's atmosphere. On the bridge, Lieutenant Vega sat in the command chair, watching the tactical display as the Marauder ships began to register the unexpected presence. "They've detected us," reported Tactical Officer Wei. "Corvettes moving to intercept." "Evasive pattern Delta," Vega ordered calmly. "Weapons hot. Target the primary extraction facility as soon as we're in range." The Vigilant banked sharply at stealth systems now fully disengaged as it raced toward the designated coordinates. Alarms blared as Marauder weapons locks activated. "Incoming fire." "Shields at maximum," Vega commanded. "Return fire only if directly threatened. Our priority is the ground targets." On the planet's surface, Captain Hart and her team were positioned at the entrance to a tunnel system that would lead them beneath the central Marauder research facility. They wore the enhanced biomantle armor, now fully integrated with their tactical systems, and responsive to both conscious commands and unconscious needs. "Vigilant has engaged," Hart announced, as the update came through her comm system. "Tire lens status of your forces." The Zeri commander, leading a force of 300 warriors through parallel tunnels, responded promptly. "In position, Human Captain. The cultivators prepare the mantle network. They require 15 minutes to achieve full synchronization." "Understood. Dr. Ayer, is the countermeasure ready?" Ayer nodded, indicating a containment unit strapped to her back. Within it, a sample of purified biomantle pulsed with bioluminescent energy. "Ready, Captain. Once delivered to the central research facility, it will recognize and neutralize the corrupted strains. Then we move," Hart decided. "Stay tight, watch for detection grids, and remember our primary objective is delivery of the countermeasure. Engaging Marauder forces directly is a last resort." The team began their advance through the tunnels, guided by Zeri scouts who seemed able to communicate with the very walls around them. The passages twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing to the point where they had to crawl other times, opening into vast caverns filled with glowing fungi and strange crystalline formations. After 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a barrier, a detection grid of energy beams crisscrossing the tunnel ahead. "This is new," whispered the Zeri scout. "The harvesters have improved their security since our last reconnaissance." Chief Zhao examined the grid with his enhanced visual sensors. Standard motion and heat detection. The pattern suggests Cygarian technology likely acquired through black market channels. "Can you disable it?" Hart asked. "Not without triggering alarms," Zhao replied. "But I might be able to loop the sensor data, creating a temporary blind spot." While Zhao worked, Hart received another update from the Vigilant. "Captain, we've hit the first extraction facility." Vega reported, his voice partially obscured by static and the sounds of combat. "Significant damage inflicted, but we're taking heavy fire from the corvettes. The cruisers are moving to intercept, and the Harvester has changed course, heading toward our position." "Perfect," Hart replied. "Keep them focused on you for another 10 minutes, then disengage and move to secondary targets." "Acknowledged. Vigilant out." Above them, the battle raged as the Earthship executed a series of daring maneuvers, its advanced technology allowing it to strike and evade with precision that the heavier Marauder vessels couldn't match. But the Vigilant was outnumbered, and each pass brought more damage to its shields and hull. On the Harvester's bridge, Commodore Cale Dre watched the unexpected attack with a mixture of rage and curiosity. "Identification of the vessel," he demanded of his sensor officer. "Unknown, Commodore. Configuration suggests Earth origin, but it's using stealth technology beyond anything in our database." Dre's eyes narrowed. "Earth. What interest do those primitives have in this operation?" He studied the tactical display, noting the precision of the attacks against the extraction facilities. "They're targeting our biomantle research specifically. Someone has told them what we're doing here." He turned to his communications officer. "Order all ships to converge on the intruder. I want it destroyed or captured. And alert the ground facilities. If Earth has sent one ship, they may have sent ground forces as well." Back in the tunnels, Zhao had successfully created a temporary blind spot in the detection grid. "We have 30 seconds before the system resets," he informed the team. "Move quickly, one at a time." They slipped through the gap and sequenced their biomantle-enhanced suits, adapting to minimize heat and electromagnetic signatures. Once past the barrier, they continued their advance, now moving with greater urgency, as alarms began to sound throughout the facility above them. "They know something's wrong," Nomura observed grimly. "Expect resistance ahead." Hart nodded. "Tierlan, what's your status?" "We have breached the lower levels of the research facility," the Zeri commander reported. "Engaging Harvester security forces now. The cultivators require 5 more minutes to activate the planetary defense." "We'll be there," Hart promised. "Hold your position." The tunnel ahead opened into a larger chamber, with multiple exits, a junction point in the complex network of passages. As they entered, Hart's tactical sensors detected movement. "Contact," she warned, raising her weapon. "Multiple hostiles, 3 o'clock." Marauder security forces poured into the chamber from one of the side tunnels, a mix of different species united by their distinctive black and red armor, and the profit motive that drove the Marauder collective. "Surrender your weapons," ordered their leader, a towering draconian, whose scaled skin gleamed in the dim light. By order of Commodore Dre. Hart assessed their options quickly. There were at least 20 Marauders well armed and positioned with clear lines of fire. A direct confrontation would delay them too long and potentially damage the biomantle countermeasure. "Lieutenant Nomura, deploy smoke countermeasures," she ordered quietly. "Dr. Iyer, prepare to move on my signal. Chief Zhao, find us another route to the central lab." Before the Marauders could react, Nomura launched a series of smoke grenades that filled the chamber with dense, sensor-blocking fog. The biomantle in their suits instantly adapted, enhancing their visual capabilities to see through the obscuring clouds. "This way," Zhao indicated a narrow passage to their left. "It's a maintenance tunnel that should bypass their main defense points." As the Marauders began firing blindly into the smoke, Hart and her team slipped into the side passage, sealing it behind them with a localized explosive charge. "That won't hold them long," Hart noted. "We need to move faster." The maintenance tunnel was cramped and poorly lit, forcing them to advance in single file. After several minutes of uncomfortable crawling, they emerged into what appeared to be a storage area, filled with equipment and containment units. What they saw inside those units made them freeze in horror. Dozens of Zeri were suspended in transparent fluid, their bodies connected to a network of tubes and monitoring devices. Their skin patterns flickered weakly, indicating they were alive, but barely conscious. Around them, harvested biomantle organisms floated in separate chambers, their natural bioluminescence dulled to a sickly glow. "They're extracting the bonding proteins," Dr. Iyer realized, scanning the equipment, "forcing symbiosis under controlled conditions to weaponize the process." Hart felt her rage building but forced herself to focus on the mission. "Can we free them?" Iyer shook her head regretfully. "Not without proper medical facilities. The process they're using creates a dependency on the life support systems. Removing them now would kill them. Then we make sure their suffering isn't for nothing," Hart decided grimly. "The central lab, where would it be from here?" Zhao consulted the schematic Tierlen had provided. "One level down. There should be an access shaft in the northeast corner of this room." They located the shaft, a maintenance ladder, leading to the facility's lower level. As they prepared to descend, Hart's comm system crackled with an urgent transmission from the Vigilant. "Captain, we've sustained heavy damage," Vega reported, his voice strained. "Shields at 30% hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. We've destroyed 2 extraction facilities, but the Marauder fleet has us surrounded." "What about the Harvester?" Hart asked. "It's moved into low orbit directly above your position. They're deploying additional ground forces." Hart calculated quickly. "Hold position for 3 more minutes, then execute emergency jump to predetermined coordinates. We need the Harvester exactly where it is when the planetary defense activates." "Captain," Vega objected, "if we leave, you'll have no extraction plan." "We'll find another way out," Hart assured him, though she wasn't at all certain of that. "Protect the ship, Lieutenant. That's an order." After a moment's hesitation, Vega acknowledged. "Understood, Captain. Good luck. Vigilant out." Hart turned to her team. "Change of plans. We're going to be on our own once we deliver the countermeasure. The Vigilant is too damaged to wait for us." "So how do we get off this rock?" Nomura asked bluntly. "One problem at a time," Lieutenant Hart replied. "First, we complete the mission. Dr. Iyer, you and I will deliver the countermeasure to the central lab. Chief Zhao, Lieutenant Nomura, you'll rendezvous with Tierlen's forces and coordinate the evacuation of any Zeri prisoners you can safely move." Captain Zhao began to object, but Hart cut him off. "That's an order, Chief. The countermeasure is our priority, but I won't leave anyone behind if there's a chance to save them." The team separated at the bottom of the access shaft, with Zhao and Nomura heading toward the sounds of combat where Tierlen's forces were engaged with Marauder security, while Hart and Iyer moved deeper into the facility. The central laboratory was easy to identify, a large circular chamber dominated by a massive containment system at its center. Inside, a pulsating mass of corrupted biomantle glowed with an unnatural red light, its tendrils writhing against the transparent walls that held it. "That's it," Iyer whispered, horrified. "They've created a fully weaponized strain. If released, it would corrupt all natural biomantle it contacts, turning it against its hosts." Scientists in Marauder uniforms worked at control stations around the perimeter, monitoring the containment system and making adjustments to various parameters. None had noticed the new arrivals, yet an oversight Hart intended to exploit. "How close do you need to get to deploy the countermeasure?" she asked quietly. Iyer studied the chamber layout. "The central ventilation system would be ideal. It connects to the containment unit's environmental controls. If I can introduce the countermeasure there, it will spread throughout the entire system." Hart nodded. "Cover me. I'll create a diversion while you reach the ventilation access." Before Iyer could protest, Hart stepped boldly into the laboratory, her weapon raised. "Attention, everyone," she announced loudly. "This facility is now under United Earth Navy control. Step away from your stations and put your hands where I can see them." The scientists froze, then scrambled for alarm buttons and weapons. Hart fired precision shots at the control panels, disabling them without harming the personnel. In the confusion, Ear slipped around the perimeter of the room toward the ventilation system. Security breach in Central Laboratory. One of the scientists managed to shout into a comm device before Hart disabled it with another well-placed shot. "You're too late," sneered another scientist of Vesperian, whose insectoid features twisted into what might have been a smile. "The process is already complete. The weaponized strain is stable and ready for deployment." "That's what you think," Hart replied, keeping her weapon trained on the group, while watching Ayer's progress from the corner of her eye. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and Hart knew they had only minutes before security forces converged on their position. Ayer had reached the ventilation access panel and was working quickly to open it and prepare the countermeasure. "Planetary defense activation in 1 minute," came Tyerlen's voice over the comm system. "All forces should secure their positions." Hart acknowledged the warning. "Dr. Ayer status?" "Almost there," Ayer replied, her fingers flying over the access panel. "The system is trying to lock me out, but the biomantle interface is adapting to the security protocols." Suddenly, the laboratory doors slid open, revealing a squad of heavily armed Marauder security forces, led by a tall, imposing figure, whose uniform marked him as a senior officer. "Captain Hart, I presume," the officer said smoothly. "I am Commodore Cale Dre of the Marauder Collective. I must admit I'm impressed by your audacity, if not your intelligence. Did you really think a single Earthship could challenge our operation here?" Hart kept her weapon steady, positioning herself between Dre and Ayer. "Not a single ship, Commodore. A single planet." Dre laughed. "Earth, that backwater death world, what could—" His words were cut off as the entire facility shuddered violently. The lights flickered and equipment crashed to the floor, as a deep, resonant vibration built beneath them. "Now, Doctor," Hart shouted. Ayer slammed the countermeasure container into the ventilation system and activated the release mechanism. The purified biomantle flowed into the ducts, spreading rapidly toward the central containment unit. Dre realized what was happening too late. "Stop them!" he ordered his security team, but they were thrown off balance by another stronger tremor that shook the entire structure. "The planetary defense is active," Hart announced, a fierce smile on her face. "Right beneath your command ship, Commodore. Vexus itself is fighting back." Through the facility's monitoring systems, they could see what was happening on the surface. A massive geothermal eruption had burst forth directly beneath the Harvester's position, enveloping the dreadnought in a column of energy that overwhelmed its shields. Simultaneously, electromagnetic pulses rippled across the planet's surface, disrupting Marauder communications and weapon systems. In the central containment unit, the weaponized biomantle writhed more violently as the countermeasure reached it. The unnatural red glow began to fade, replaced by the natural bioluminescence of healthy biomantle. The corruption was being neutralized cell by cell. Dre watched in horror as his carefully orchestrated operation collapsed around him. "What have you done?" he demanded, his composed facade cracking. "Restored balance," Hart replied simply. "The biomantle isn't meant to be a weapon, Commodore. It's a partner species that deserves respect, not exploitation." Another violent tremor rocked the facility, more destructive than the previous ones. Ceiling panels crashed down, and support structures began to buckle. "The defense mechanism is exceeding predicted parameters." Tyerlen's voice came through the comm, tight with concern. "The cultivators cannot maintain control much longer. All forces must evacuate immediately." Hart grabbed Ayer and pulled her toward a side exit as Dre and his security team struggled to maintain their footing. "Time to go, Doctor. Mission accomplished." They raced through the collapsing facility, dodging falling debris and fleeing Marauder personnel. The comm system crackled with updates from Zhao and Nomura, who had successfully rendezvoused with Tierlen's forces and were evacuating the Zeri prisoners they could safely move. "Captain, we've secured an escape route through the northeast tunnels," Zhao reported. "But we need to move quickly. The entire complex is becoming unstable." "On our way," Hart confirmed. Meet you at the extraction point. As they navigated the chaotic evacuation, Hart's suit sensors detected a familiar signature. The corrupted biomantle strain had escaped its containment during the destruction and was spreading through the facility. But something unexpected was happening rather than attacking. It was being transformed by contact, with the countermeasure reverting to its natural state. "Doctor, look!" Hart pointed to where tendrils of biomantle were flowing along the walls, their color shifting from sickly red to healthy blue-green. "It's working even better than we anticipated." Ayer studied the phenomenon with professional fascination, despite their dire circumstances. The countermeasure isn't just neutralizing the corruption, it's actively healing it. The biomantle is returning to its natural symbiotic state. They reached the rendezvous point, a large storage bay, where Zhao Nomura and Tierlen had gathered with approximately 50 rescued Zeri and a contingent of warriors. Many were injured and all looked exhausted, but there was a palpable sense of determination among them. "The tunnels to Zinvaral are blocked by collapse," Tierlen reported grimly. "We cannot return the way we came." "And our marauder friends?" Hart asked, noting the absence of pursuit. In disarray, Nomura replied with satisfaction. "The planetary defense mechanism disrupted their command structure. Commodore Dre might have survived, but his forces are scattered, and their communications are down." Another violent tremor emphasized the urgency of their situation. "We need an alternative exit strategy," Hart stated, thinking rapidly. "What about marauder transport vessels? They must have landing craft somewhere in this facility." Zhao nodded. "I accessed their systems during our advance. There's a hangar bay 1 level up northwest quadrant. At least 3 shuttles were docked there as of 2 hours ago." "That's our target then," Hart decided. "Tierlen, can your warriors assist with the wounded?" The Zeri commander inclined his head. "Of course, human captain. We move as one." The combined force made their way carefully through the destabilizing facility, Zeri and humans working seamlessly together. The biomantle in their suits continued to adapt, strengthening structural supports as they passed and clearing paths through debris. When they reached the hangar bay, they found 2 transport shuttles, still docked, angular utilitarian craft, clearly designed for function rather than aesthetics. Marauder crews were frantically preparing for evacuation, loading equipment and data storage devices. "Looks like we're not the only ones abandoning ship," Nomura observed. Hart assessed the situation quickly. "We need one of those shuttles. Nomura, Zhao, create a diversion at the east entrance. Tierlen, your warriors secure the nearest shuttle. Dr. Ayer and I will cover the wounded." The plan executed with military precision. Nomura and Zhao drew marauder attention with targeted weapons fire, while Tierlen's warriors swarmed the nearest shuttle, overwhelming its skeleton crew with superior numbers and coordination. Within minutes, they had secured the vessel and begun loading the wounded Zeri aboard. Hart established a defensive perimeter with the remaining warriors holding off marauder reinforcements that had belatedly responded to the attack. The biomantle in their armor seemed to anticipate threats, hardening against incoming fire and enhancing their reflexes. "That's the last of the wounded," Ayer reported as the final rescued prisoner was carried aboard. "We're at maximum capacity, Captain." Hart nodded. "Tierlen, get your people aboard. We'll cover your departure." The Zeri commander hesitated. "Human captain, there is no honor in sacrifice if shared victory is possible. We will not leave you behind." "No one's being left behind," Hart assured him. "We're right behind you. Now go, that's an order." As Tierlen reluctantly complied, another series of explosions rocked the facility. The hangar bay ceiling began to collapse, massive support beams crashing down around them. "Time to go," Hart shouted to her team backing toward the shuttle as marauder forces pressed their attack with increasing desperation. They made it aboard just as the hangar doors began to fail, atmosphere venting into the toxic surface environment. Zhao took the pilot's seat, his cybernetic interfaces connecting directly with the shuttle's controls. "Unfamiliar system, but the basics are universal," he muttered, fingers dancing across the console. Hang on, this won't be the smoothest takeoff. The shuttle lurched violently as Zhao forced it through the partially collapsed hangar doors, scraping the hull against twisted metal and barely clearing the opening before the entire structure imploded behind them. On the surface, Vexus's hellish environment greeted them, swirling acidic clouds, lightning storms, and the ongoing geological upheaval caused by the planetary defense mechanism. Through gaps in the storm, they could see the Harvester listing in low orbit, its hull breached in multiple locations, and its engines offline. The Vigilant. Hart asked, hoping against hope that Vega had disobeyed her order to withdraw. No sign of them on sensors, Zhao reported after a moment. They must have jumped to the emergency coordinates as ordered. Hart nodded, unsurprised, but still disappointed. What about the rest of the Marauder fleet? Scattered. Some have already jumped out system. Others are attempting to assist the Harvester, but the continuing electromagnetic pulses are hampering their efforts. And our destination? Hart looked to Tyr Len. The Zeri commander consulted with one of his warriors before responding. There is another deep city, Kirvorath. It was believed lost, but some of our rescued scientists indicate it may still exist hidden beneath the southern polar region. The Mantle Network confirms there is something still alive there. How far? Hart asked. Approximately 2,000 kilometers, Zhao calculated, after examining the navigational data. This shuttle has sufficient range, but the atmospheric conditions will make the journey treacherous. We've faced worse, Hart replied. She turned to address everyone aboard the crowded shuttle. Our mission isn't over. We've struck a significant blow against the Marauders, but Vexus remains vulnerable. The Vigilant will return when it can, but for now we're on our own. Our priority is reaching Kirvorath safely, with the knowledge and people we've rescued. Dr. Iyer approached her, expression troubled. Captain, the biomantle in our suits is communicating something. It's difficult to interpret, but I believe it's warning us about the planetary defense mechanism. The cultivators can't maintain control much longer. Hart looked to Tyr Len for confirmation. The Zeri's skin had taken on a deep, sorrowful purple. The human doctor speaks truth, he admitted. The bond between the cultivators and the Mantle Network was never meant to channel such power for so long. When their control fails... What happens? Hart asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Cascading tectonic events, Iyer responded grimly. Essentially, a planetary-scale earthquake that could reshape Vexus's entire surface. Hart made her decision quickly. Zhao set course for Kirvorath, maximum safe speed. Nomura, monitor Marauder communications. I want to know the moment they start regrouping. Tyr Len, have your best warriors work with Dr. Iyer to see if there's any way to communicate with the cultivators from here. Maybe we can help them release control safely, rather than catastrophically. The shuttle surged forward, skimming just above Vexus's turbulent surface, to avoid detection by any remaining Marauder ships. Through the viewports, they could see the landscape below, being torn apart by increasingly violent geological events. Mountains, crumbling chasms opening, and rivers of molten material bursting through the planet's crust. In the cramped passenger compartment, Dr. Iyer worked with Zeri specialists, their biomantle interfaces creating a strange, silent communication as they attempted to reach the distant cultivators through the planetary network. It's working, Iyer reported, after nearly an hour of concentrated effort. We've established a tenuous connection. The cultivators acknowledge our success against the Harvesters, but they cannot maintain control much longer. She hesitated, her expression pained. They're asking for permission to let go. Hart understood the gravity of the request. What are the consequences if they release control now? Significant surface restructuring, Tyr Len answered. But if they continue to hold the power until their bodies fail, the release would be far more destructive, potentially threatening even the deepest subterranean habitats. Hart looked around at the rescued Zeri, the loyal warriors and her own team, all exhausted, many injured, but still fighting to survive. Tell them to release control on their terms. We'll deal with the consequences. Ayer nodded and relayed the message through the biomantle connection. Minutes later, they felt the change, a shift in the rhythm of the tremors below, becoming more regular, almost deliberate. "They've initiated a controlled release," Ayer explained, directing the energy along established fault lines, rather than allowing random dispersal. "And the cultivators themselves?" Hart asked quietly. Ayer's expression conveyed what words couldn't. "They're saying goodbye." A respectful silence fell over the shuttle's occupants, broken only by the sounds of the engines and the occasional report from Zhao on their course adjustments. After several minutes, a powerful but somehow graceful series of tremors rippled across the planet's surface, the final act of the cultivators who had sacrificed themselves to protect their world. "They are one with the mantle network now," Tierlen said solemnly. "Their consciousness will live on within it, guiding future generations." Hart nodded, honoring their sacrifice with silence. She'd lost soldiers before given the order that sent them to their deaths, but never had she witnessed such a willing, profound sacrifice. These were not warriors driven by duty or training, but scientists who had given their lives to preserve a symbiotic relationship thousands of years in the making. The journey to Kirvorath took nearly 6 hours, with the shuttle battling increasingly hostile weather conditions as they approached the southern polar region. Ice storms replaced acid rain, and temperatures dropped to levels that would freeze exposed flesh in seconds. "We're receiving a signal," Nomura announced suddenly. "Faint but definitely artificial, originating from approximately 20 kilometers ahead." "Can you identify it?" Hart asked. "It's Zeri communication protocols, but older than those used by Zin Viral. And there's something else mixed in." Nomura frowned in concentration. "It's an Earth emergency beacon frequency." Hart and her team exchanged confused glances. "Earth? That's not possible. No Earthship has ever ventured this deep into Vexus before us." "The signature is unmistakable," Nomura insisted. "Standard UEN emergency protocol, but the ID code doesn't match any vessel in our database." Tierlen's skin rippled with patterns of excitement and concern. "The legends of Kirvorath speak of visitors from beyond the stars who came during the third cataclysm. They helped rebuild when the surface fires raged. Could they have been humans?" "Impossible," Hart replied automatically. "Earth hadn't developed faster than light travel during any period that could correspond to your historical cataclysms." "Unless they weren't from Earth directly," Dr. Ayer suggested thoughtfully. "Early colonial vessels, perhaps several, were lost during the first expansion era." Before they could speculate further, Zhao reported, "Visual contact with the signal source. You're going to want to see this, Captain." Hart moved to the forward viewport, and what she saw left her momentarily speechless. Nestled within a massive ice canyon was a structure unlike anything she'd expected, a hybrid of Zerii, organic architecture, and unmistakably human engineering. At its center stood a vessel ancient by modern standards, but recognizable as an early Earth colony ship, its hull partially embedded in the ice and overgrown with biomantle formations that seemed to be sustaining it rather than consuming it. "The ESS Pathfinder." Ayer whispered in awe, recognizing the faded designation on the hull. It was reported lost with all hands during the first expansion wave over a century ago. Everyone assumed it was destroyed in an FTL malfunction. "Apparently not," Hart murmured. "It found Vexus and Kirvorath." As they approached, the ice canyon walls parted not naturally, but in response to some unseen command. A landing bay opened within the integrated structure, large enough to accommodate their shuttle with room to spare. "We're being invited in," Zhao noted unnecessarily. "Any signs of weapons or defensive systems?" Hart asked her caution, never fully subsiding even in the face of apparent welcome. "Negative," Nomura reported. "But there's significant biomantle activity throughout the structure. It's like the entire facility is alive and watching us." Hart made her decision. "Take us in, Chief, but be prepared for immediate extraction if necessary." The shuttle glided into the landing bay, settling gently onto a platform that seemed to shift slightly to accommodate the vessel's weight, another manifestation of the responsive biomantle technology. As the external doors sealed behind them, the bay pressurized and flooded with breathable atmosphere. Environmental conditions are within human and Zeri tolerance ranges. Ear reported studying her scanner. Slightly higher oxygen content than standard, but nothing dangerous. Then let's meet our hosts, Hart decided. Nomura Zhao with me. Dr. Iyer coordinate with Tier Len to establish a triage area for the wounded. No one leaves the shuttle until we confirm it's safe. The small team exited cautiously, weapons ready, but not raised aggressively. The landing bay was illuminated by the same bioluminescent light they'd seen in Zinvaral. But with subtle differences, the patterns were more geometric, suggesting a blending of Zerii, organic design with human engineering principles. They had taken only a few steps when a door at the far end of the bay slid open, revealing two figures, one clearly Zeri, the other unmistakably human, despite the unusual adaptations visible even at a distance. "Welcome to Kirvarath," called the human figure in accented but understandable English. "We've been expecting you." Hart exchanged glances with her officers before responding. "You've been expecting us specifically, or just hoping someone would eventually find you?" A laugh, warm and genuine, echoed across the bay. "A fair question, Captain Hart. Let's say we've been hoping for contact with Earth for many years, but expecting you specifically since your ship entered the Vexus system. The Mantle Network keeps us well informed." The figures approached, and Hart could now see them clearly. The human was an elderly man, perhaps in his 80s, with the distinctive physical adaptations of long-term exposure to extreme environments, enhanced musculature to compensate for Vexus's gravity, slightly enlarged eyes, adapted to low light conditions, and most notably, visible biomantle integration patterns across his exposed skin. The Zeri beside him was even more unusual, taller than any they had encountered in Zinvaral, with more complex skin patterns and an air of ancient wisdom that transcended species barriers. "I am Dr. Marcus Elliott, former science officer of the ESS Pathfinder," the human introduced himself. "And this is Elder Lear Vaughn, last of the original Kirvarath Council. We have much to discuss, but first your wounded need attention and you all need rest. The journey from Zinvaral cannot have been easy." Hart was momentarily taken aback by the casual mention of their point of origin, but quickly reminded herself of the Mantle Network the doctor had referenced. If it truly spanned the planet, their movements would indeed be known to anyone connected to it. "Thank you, Dr. Elliott," she replied formally. "We have approximately 50 wounded Zeri rescued from Marauder captivity, plus my own team. Any medical assistance would be appreciated." Elliott nodded to his companion, who made a series of clicks and whistles. In response, dozens of Zeri emerged from various entrances around the bay, moving with purpose toward the shuttle. Unlike those from Zinvaral, these individuals showed signs of human influence in their clothing and equipment, a hybrid culture that had clearly evolved over decades of coexistence. "Our medical facilities are prepared," Elliott assured them. "The biomantle integration your team exhibits is fascinating, quite advanced for Earth technology. There have been significant developments since our unplanned settlement here." "That's putting it mildly," Hart replied. "Dr. Elliott, while I appreciate the welcome, I have numerous questions about your presence here and the nature of this facility." "All in good time, Captain," Elliott promised. "For now, let us attend to immediate needs. The Marauders have been dealt a significant blow, but they are not defeated. And Vexus itself remains in flux following the planetary defense activation. We have much to prepare for." As the rescued Zeri were carefully transferred to the care of Kirvarath's medical teams, Hart found herself both relieved at finding sanctuary and deeply unsettled by the implications of discovering humans who had been integrated into Zeri society for a century. The ESS Pathfinder's presence raised as many questions as it answered and suggested that Earth's relationship with Vexus might be far more complex than anyone in the Galactic Council had imagined. The medical facility of Kirvorath was an extraordinary blend of human and Zeri technology, recognizable Earth medical equipment from a century past, enhanced and modified with biomantle integration to create healing systems beyond anything currently available in the most advanced Council worlds. Dr. Iyer moved through the space in a state of barely contained scientific excitement, documenting everything she saw while assisting with the treatment of the rescued prisoners. "The cellular regeneration rate is remarkable," she told Hart, as they observed a seriously injured Zeri eye being treated by what appeared to be living medical equipment. "The biomantle doesn't just repair damage, it adapts to prevent similar injuries in the future. It's learning and evolving constantly, like our suits did during combat," Hart noted, glancing down at her own armor, which had developed new patterns and capabilities during their mission. "Exactly, but on a much more sophisticated level. These people have had generations to perfect the symbiosis." Iyer lowered her voice. "Captain, the implications of this technology go far beyond military applications. This could revolutionize medicine, environmental engineering, even space travel." "Assuming we can bring this knowledge back to Earth," Hart reminded her. "We're still stranded on a death world with limited resources and no guarantee the Vigilant will be able to return for us." "I believe I might be able to address some of those concerns," said Dr. Elliot, approaching them with a datapad in hand. Despite his age and the obvious adaptations to Vexus's environment, he moved with the vigor of a much younger man, another benefit of the biomantle integration Hart surmised. "Your ship, the Vigilant, has not abandoned you," Elliot continued. "They executed an emergency jump to avoid destruction, but our long-range sensors indicate they've returned to the edge of the system. They appear to be conducting repairs while attempting to avoid detection by the remaining Marauder vessels." Hart felt a surge of pride and relief. Lieutenant Vega had followed orders, but hadn't abandoned them. "Can we contact them?" "Not directly, not yet," Elliot admitted. "The continuing electromagnetic disturbances from the planetary defense activation are interfering with conventional communications. However, the Mantle Network offers alternatives." He gestured for them to follow him to a separate chamber, where Tierlen and Elder Lear Von were engaged in what appeared to be a silent communion, their bodies connected to a pulsating mass of biomantle that filled a central basin. "The Deep Communion," Elliot explained. "Through it we can connect with the planet-wide network and potentially reach specific points on the surface, including locations where your ship might detect a signal." Hart studied the setup with cautious interest. "And this would allow us to coordinate an extraction?" "Potentially, yes. But there is a more pressing matter to discuss first." Elliot's expression grew serious. "The Marauders have suffered a significant defeat, but they have not been eliminated. Commodore Dre survived, as did many of his senior officers. They are regrouping with reinforcements from the outer system." Hart frowned. "Reinforcements. Our intelligence indicated the blockade fleet was their entire presence in this system." "Your intelligence was incomplete," Elliot said simply. "The Marauders have maintained a research outpost in the asteroid belt for years, a backup facility where they've been developing alternative methods to weaponize the biomantle. Our sources within the Mantle Network indicate they are preparing to abandon Vexus entirely, but not before executing a final strike to eliminate evidence and witnesses." "A scorched earth policy," Hart murmured grimly. "How much time do we have?" 48 hours at most. They're having difficulty coordinating due to the electromagnetic interference, but that won't last forever." Hart considered their options. The Vigilant was damaged and outnumbered, and, even with the Zeri's planetary defenses, they couldn't protect the entire world from a determined orbital bombardment. "We need a more permanent solution," she decided. "Not just driving them off, but ensuring they can't return. Dr. Elliot, in the century you've been here, have you developed any defensive technologies that could help?" Elliot exchanged glances with Elder Lear Von, who had disengaged from the Deep Communion and joined their discussion. "We have something better than a weapon, Captain Hart. The ancient Zeri, said his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We have understanding." Hart waited for elaboration, but it was Elliot who continued. "When the Pathfinder crashed on Vexus, we were dying. The ship's systems were failing, and the planet's environment was killing us faster than we could adapt. The people of Kirvorath found us, or rather sensed us through the Mantle Network. Instead of seeing us as threats or resources to be exploited, they recognized fellow survivors. They offered us symbiosis." Elliot continued displaying his arm, where the biomantle integration was clearly visible beneath his skin. Not just technological cooperation, but true biological partnership. Those of us who accepted the bond survived and thrived. We became something new, neither fully human nor Zerii, but a bridge between worlds. Hart began to understand the direction this was heading. "And you believe this kind of symbiosis could be the key to protecting Vexus?" "Not just protecting it," Elliot corrected. "Transforming it. The Council sees Vexus as a death world because they lack the perspective to understand it. The Marauders see it as a resource to be exploited. But what if there was a third option, a world that could defend itself by changing how others perceive it?" Hart looked skeptical. "You're suggesting we change the Marauders' minds? I don't think diplomatic overtures will be effective at this point." Elder Lear Vaughn made a sound that might have been laughter. "Not their minds, human captain. Their understanding. Through the Mantle Network, we can project a form of communication that transcends conventional methods, a direct neural interface that conveys experience, rather than just information." "You want to show them what the biomantle really is?" Dr. Iyer realized her scientific mind, grasping the concept quickly. "Make them experience the symbiosis firsthand." "Exactly," Elliot confirmed. "But to do so on the scale necessary would require a coordinated effort beyond anything attempted before. We would need to amplify the signal through multiple nodes of the network, simultaneously creating a planetary-scale broadcast that even ships in orbit couldn't ignore." "Is that even possible?" Hart asked, looking between Elliot and Lear Vaughn. "Theoretically," the elder Zeri answered. "But it would require consensus among all remaining deep cities, channeling the collective experience of both our peoples through the Mantle Network and a focal point to direct the broadcast." "What kind of focal point?" Hart pressed. Elliot and Lear Vaughn exchanged another meaningful glance before Elliot answered. "A human Zeri hybrid consciousness, fully integrated with the network, but capable of translating the experience for those who have never encountered it before. Someone who has experienced both worlds and can bridge the gap." The implication hung in the air for a moment before Hart understood. "You're volunteering." Elliot smiled sadly. "I would, Captain, but my integration is of the old style, effective but crude by current standards. No, we need someone with a more recent connection. Someone whose biomantle bond is still forming, still adaptive." All eyes turned to Hart, whose suit had been continuously evolving throughout their mission, the biomantle responding to her leadership decisions and priorities in unique ways. "Me," she stated, rather than asked. "You want me to be the focal point?" "The biomantle has chosen you," Elder Lear Vaughn confirmed. "It recognizes in you the same qualities it values in itself: adaptability, resilience, protection of the collective. Your experiences on this mission have forged a bond stronger than any we could have artificially created." Hart took a step back, instinctively wary. "What exactly would this entail, and what are the risks?" "You would enter the deep communion," Elliot explained, gesturing to the basin of biomantle. "Your consciousness would temporarily merge with the Mantle Network, allowing you to direct the combined experiences of humans and Zerii outward, to show the Marauders the truth of what they're attempting to destroy." "And the risks," Hart insisted. Elliot didn't flinch from the truth. "Significant. Your individual consciousness could be overwhelmed by the collective. Your memories and personality might be altered by the experience. In the worst case, you might not be able to fully separate from the network afterward." "You're asking me to potentially sacrifice myself," Hart summarized bluntly. "I'm asking you to do what you came here to do," Elliot countered gently. "Protect Vexus, and its people both Zeri and human. Find a solution that doesn't require perpetual warfare or isolation. Hart looked to Dr. Iyer. Your assessment, Dr. Iyer considered carefully before responding. The science is sound if beyond our current understanding. The biomantle in your suit has already demonstrated an unusual affinity for your neural patterns. From a purely theoretical standpoint, you're the ideal candidate. She hesitated. But as your medical officer, I can't recommend a procedure with such undefined risks. And as my tactical officer, Hart asked, turning to Nomura, who had joined them silently during the discussion. 2 considerations, Captain, Nomura replied crisply. First, our current military position is untenable against a determined Marauder assault with reinforcements. Second, if this works, it potentially resolves not just the immediate threat, but the long-term security of Vexus. High risk, but potentially high reward. Hart took a moment to process everything. She had come to Vexus expecting a straightforward military operation, break the blockade, stop the bioweapon development, get out. Instead, she found herself at the center of something far more profound, a potential turning point in how humans, Zeri, and perhaps the entire Council, understood the relationship between intelligent species and the environments they inhabited. I need to speak with my entire team, she decided, and contact the Vigilant if possible. This decision affects more than just me. Of course, Elliot agreed. The Deep Communion Chamber is at your disposal for communication attempts. But remember, Captain, time is limited. The Marauders will not wait for consensus. As Hart turned to leave, Elder Lear Vaughn spoke once more. Human Captain, there is one more thing you should know. The choice before you is not without precedent. When the Pathfinder crashed here, your Dr. Elliot made a similar choice to trust in symbiosis rather than isolation. Because of that choice, 2 peoples who might have been enemies became allies. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength of arms, but from strength of understanding. Hart nodded acknowledgement, but didn't respond directly. Her mind was already racing with implications, alternatives, and the weight of responsibility that had settled on her shoulders. In a secluded chamber, converted into a temporary war room, Hart gathered her team to discuss the situation. Dr. Iyer, Lieutenant Nomura, and Chief Zhao listened intently as she outlined what she had learned from Elliot and Elder Lear Vaughn. So, to summarize, Zhao said, when she finished, we can either attempt a conventional defense against overwhelming odds, or try an unprecedented biomantle broadcast with you as the conduit, risking your consciousness in the process. Those appear to be our options, Hart confirmed. Dr. Elliot believes the Deep Communion might also allow us to contact the Vigilant, but even if we could coordinate an extraction, we'd be leaving Vexus vulnerable to future Marauder attacks. The biomantle countermeasure we deployed at the research facility was effective, Iyer pointed out. Could we not develop a more comprehensive version to neutralize any weaponized strains the Marauders might deploy? Possibly, Hart acknowledged. But that's a defensive strategy at best. It doesn't address the fundamental problem. As long as the Marauders see the biomantle as a resource to be exploited, they'll keep coming back with new methods. Nomura leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. What exactly does this broadcast aim to accomplish? Make the Marauders feel sorry for the Zeri? I doubt hardened mercenaries will suddenly develop a conscience. It's not about conscience, Iyer explained. It's about understanding. The biomantle functions through symbiotic relationships, mutual benefit through cooperation. If the broadcast can demonstrate that exploitation yields inferior results to cooperation, it makes a compelling case even to the profit-motivated Marauders. A logical appeal, rather than an emotional one, Zhao nodded. Show them that partnership is more profitable than predation. Exactly, Hart confirmed. But the question remains, is the risk worth it? And should I be the one to take it? A moment of silence fell over the room as each officer considered the implications. Permission to speak freely, Captain Nomura finally requested. Hart nodded. Always, Lieutenant. You're asking if you should risk yourself for this mission. With respect, that's the wrong question. The right question is, who else could do it? Nomura's artificial eyes fixed on Hart with unwavering focus. The biomantle has responded to you in ways it hasn't with any of us. Elliot and Learvon believe you're the ideal focal point. And most importantly, you're the commanding officer, the one with the authority to make first contact decisions of this magnitude. Lieutenant Nomura is right, Zhao added. This isn't just a military operation anymore. It's a first contact scenario with potential galaxy-wide implications. That falls squarely within a captain's purview. Hart turned to Ayer. Doctor, your medical opinion. Ayer hesitated. The risks are significant and largely unknown. But so are the potential benefits. As your medical officer, I'm concerned. As a scientist, she smiled slightly. I'm fascinated by the possibilities. If you decide to proceed, I'll monitor the process as closely as possible and intervene at the first sign of danger. Hart considered their input thoughtfully. And the vigilant. If we can make contact, what do we tell them? The truth, Zhao suggested simply. Lieutenant Vega should be informed of the situation, so he can make appropriate decisions if the broadcast fails or succeeds. Agreed, Hart decided. Let's attempt contact first. If we can coordinate with the vigilant, we'll have a fallback position regardless of the broadcast's outcome. With the decision made, they proceeded to the Deep Communion Chamber, where Dr. Elliot and a team of Zeri specialists were preparing the equipment. The central basin had been modified with additional biomantle tendrils extending from it to form what looked like a seat or throne. The communications interface, Elliot explained, noting Hart's questioning look. We've adapted it to focus the mantle network's electromagnetic sensitivity. In theory, it should allow you to project a targeted signal to your ship's location. Hart approached the unusual apparatus with caution. What do I need to do? Simply sit and allow the biomantle to make contact, Elliot instructed. Focus your thoughts on your ship and the specific individuals you wish to reach. The network will do the rest. With Dr. Ayer monitoring her vital signs, Hart seated herself in the living chair. Immediately, the biomantle in her suit responded, extending tendrils that merged with those from the basin, creating a complete circuit between her body and the planetary network. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced before, a rush of awareness that expanded outward from her physical form, spreading through tunnels and caverns, up through the planet's crust, and finally into the tumultuous atmosphere above. She could sense the electromagnetic fields that surrounded Vexus, could feel the disturbances caused by ships in orbit, could even detect the faint energy signature of a vessel hiding at the edge of the system, the Vigilant. Focusing her thoughts on the ship, on Lieutenant Vega specifically, Hart projected her consciousness outward, pushing through the interference until she felt a connection form. Lieutenant Vega, she thought clearly. This is Captain Hart. Do you receive... For a moment, there was nothing but the vast humming awareness of Vexus itself. Then faintly at first, but growing stronger. Captain, is that really you? How is this possible? The response wasn't audible. It was a direct mental impression carried through the mantle network and translated into something her human consciousness could interpret. It's a long story, Lieutenant Hart replied, marveling at the strange mode of communication. I don't have time to explain everything, but we're alive and have made contact with a previously unknown Zeri settlement that includes human inhabitants from the ESS Pathfinder. She sensed Vega's shock and confusion, followed by cautious acceptance. Understood, Captain. The Vigilant has sustained damage but remains operational. We've been monitoring Marauder communications. They're bringing in reinforcements. What are your orders? Hart quickly outlined the situation and the proposed broadcast plan. She could feel Vega's concern when she explained her role as the focal point, but also his grudging acknowledgement of the strategic necessity. It's a significant risk, Captain, came his response. But I understand the potential benefit. What support do you need from the Vigilant? Position yourselves to intercept any Marauder vessels that attempt to flee the system after the broadcast, Hart instructed. If this works as Elliot and Learvon believe the Marauders who experience it will be changed, but some may try to escape rather than accept the new understanding. They can't be allowed to warn others or return with a larger fleet. And if it doesn't work? Hart appreciated Vega's direct approach. Then execute Contingency Protocol Omega. Get the Vigilant back to Earth and warn the Council that the Marauders have obtained weaponized biomantle technology. Better they know the truth than face it unprepared. She sensed Vega's reluctance, but also his determination. Understood, Captain. But for the record, I expect to be picking you up after a successful operation. The Vigilant will be in position within 12 hours. Good hunting, Lieutenant, Hart responded. Hart out. As the connection faded, she became aware once more of her physical surroundings, the deep communion chamber. Her team, watching anxiously, Dr. Elliot and Elder Lear Vaughn, standing nearby with expressions of amazement. You established contact, Elliot, said, his voice filled with wonder. The network recognized your intent and amplified it. This confirms our theory you're an ideal conduit for the broadcast. Hart carefully disengaged from the communication apparatus, feeling the biomantle tendrils reluctantly withdrawing. The experience had left her mentally exhausted, but also exhilarated. The sense of connection of being part of something vast and ancient lingered even after the physical link was severed. The Vigilant will be in position within 12 hours, she reported to her team. That gives us time to prepare for the broadcast operation. And you've decided to proceed? Ayer asked, studying the medical readings she had collected during the communication attempt. Hart nodded firmly. Yes, the contact experience was illuminating. I believe this approach has merit. She turned to Elliot and Lear Vaughn. What preparations are needed? The deep cities must be unified, Elder Lear Vaughn explained. Zin Voral Kirvorath and any other remaining settlements must align their mantle networks, a synchronization that has not been attempted in generations. My team and I will coordinate with the human elements, Elliot added. The descendants of the Pathfinder crew have maintained our technological heritage while embracing Zeri biological integration. Their perspective will be crucial to creating a broadcast that non-integrated beings can comprehend. And my role? Hart asked. Rest, Elliot said firmly. The broadcast will demand everything from you, Captain. Your mind and body must be at full strength when the time comes. Hart wanted to object to insist on participating in the preparations, but the fatigue pulling at her consciousness was undeniable. The brief connection with the mantle network had taxed her more than she wanted to admit. 4 hours, she conceded. Then, I want a full briefing on the broadcast procedure and all associated risks. Elliot nodded. Of course, Captain. We'll have everything prepared. As Hart allowed Dr. Ayer to escort her to quarters that had been prepared for the Earth team, she found her thoughts returning to the sensation of planetary connection she had experienced. For a brief moment, she had touched something profound, a consciousness that spanned an entire world, that remembered millennia of evolution and adaptation, that had learned to thrive in conditions that should have made life impossible. And soon, she would immerse herself in that consciousness, completely becoming the bridge between two species, two worldviews, and potentially two futures for Vexus and its inhabitants. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity, a chance to forge an alliance that could transform humanity's place in the galaxy. Sleep came surprisingly easily, carrying her into dreams, filled with living light, and the gentle pulse of a planet that had chosen to make its most dangerous inhabitants its most valuable partners. 12 hours later, Hart stood once more before the deep communion basin, now transformed into an elaborate integration chamber. Additional pools of biomantle surrounded the central basin, each connected to a Zeri elder, or human-Zeri hybrid, who would help channel and focus the broadcast. Dr. Ayer had attached monitoring devices to Hart's body, while Elliot made final adjustments to the integration apparatus. The process will occur in stages, Elliot explained as he worked. First, a surface-level integration, similar to what you experienced during the communication attempt. This allows your consciousness to acclimate to the expanded awareness. Then comes the deep integration, Elder Lear Vaughn continued. Your individual awareness will merge with the collective experience of the Mantle Network. You will retain your core identity, but gain access to the accumulated knowledge and perspective of both our peoples. Finally, the broadcast itself, Elliot concluded. You will direct the collective experience outward, focusing on the Marauder vessels in orbit. The Mantle Network will translate the experience into a form they can comprehend regardless of their species or prior understanding. Hart listened carefully, mentally preparing herself for what was to come. She had removed her armor, wearing only a simple bodysuit that would allow maximum contact with the biomantle. The living substance had already begun to respond to her proximity tendrils, reaching toward her with almost eager anticipation. And extraction, she asked. How do I disconnect once the broadcast is complete? Elliot and Lear Vaughn exchanged glances. The network should release you naturally as the broadcast concludes, Elliot said, though Hart detected a note of uncertainty in his voice. If not, we'll initiate a controlled separation using counter-resonance patterns. Hart nodded, accepting the inherent risks. She turned to her team, Ayer Nomura and Zhao, who would monitor the process from a safe distance. If anything goes wrong, she instructed them, your priority is to complete the mission. Ensure the broadcast reaches the Marauders, then get back to the Vigilant with all the data you've collected. Earth needs to understand what we've discovered here, both the threats and the opportunities. With respect, Captain Nomura replied firmly, We're not leaving without you. Hart smiled slightly. I appreciate the sentiment, Lieutenant, but the mission comes first. That's an order. Before further objections could be raised, Hart turned back to the integration chamber. I'm ready, she told Elliot and Lear Vaughn. Let's begin. She stepped into the central basin, the biomantle immediately responding to her presence flowing up around her legs and torso like a living embrace. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant, warm, supportive, almost welcoming. Remember, Elliot's voice came to her as the biomantle rose higher. Focus on your core identity, your name, your purpose, your values. Use them as anchors when the collective awareness threatens to overwhelm you. Hart nodded, already feeling the first hints of expanded consciousness as the biomantle made deeper contact with her nervous system. She concentrated on her identity, Captain Elena Hart, United Earth Navy, commanding officer of the UES Vigilant Protector of Earth and its interests. But as the integration deepened, those anchors began to expand, incorporating new understandings. Protector, not just of Earth, but of life in all its forms. Commander not through hierarchy, but through mutual respect and shared purpose. Human, but connected to something larger than humanity alone. The second stage of integration hit like a tidal wave, a rush of awareness that expanded her consciousness beyond the confines of her physical form. Suddenly, she could sense the entire facility around her, could feel the presence of every living being within it, could trace the mantle network as it extended throughout the planet's crust and into its molten core. With that awareness came knowledge, the accumulated experiences of countless Zerii generations, the adaptive intelligence of the biomantle itself, and the unique perspective of the human settlers who had found a new kind of life on this death world. Hart struggled to maintain her individual identity amidst the flood of information clinging to her core purpose, as Elliot had instructed. And then clarity. The overwhelming input organized itself into comprehensible patterns, guided by the elders participating in the communion. Hart could still sense the vastness of the collective, but now from a position of centrality, rather than submersion, the focal point around which the broadcast would form. The Marauder fleet has entered optimal range, came Zhao's voice, sounding distant, yet perfectly clear. All 7 remaining vessels, including the repaired harvester. Initiating broadcast synchronization. Elliot's mental presence joined with hers, guiding without controlling. Focus your intent, Captain. Show them what the biomantle truly is, what Vexus truly is. Hart gathered her thoughts, drawing on the collective knowledge now available to her. She focused not on abstract concepts, but on experiences the symbiotic relationship between Zeri and Biomantle that had allowed both to survive Vexus's extreme conditions. The integration of the Pathfinder crew that had transformed potential enemies into partners. The adaptive intelligence that sought harmony rather than dominance. Most importantly, she focused on the fundamental truth the Marauders had failed to grasp, that the Biomantle's greatest value came not from what could be extracted from it, but from what could be created with it. Not from ownership, but from partnership. With that intent firmly established, Hart released her control, allowing the Mantle Network to amplify and project her understanding outward, a planetary-scale broadcast that penetrated shields and hulls as if they were transparent, reaching directly into the minds of every being aboard the Marauder vessels. From the Vigilance position at the edge of the system, Lieutenant Vega watched in astonishment as the entire planet of Vexus seemed to pulse with bioluminescent energy, concentric waves of light that spread from the surface into space, washing over the Marauder ships in orbit. "What's happening to them?" asked Ambassador Kell, who had finally emerged from his quarters to witness the phenomenon. "I don't know," Vega admitted, studying the sensor readings. "Their ships are intact, but we're detecting massive neural activity across their fleet, as if every crew member is experiencing some kind of synchronized brain stimulation." For several minutes, the strange, energetic pulse continued bathing the Marauder fleet in waves of living light. Then abruptly, it ceased, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. "Marauder communications have resumed," reported Communications Officer Nasir. "But they're different, disorganized. Some ships are reporting commands to withdraw immediately. Others are requesting permission to land on Vexus." "Landing?" Vega questioned incredulously. "Why would they want to land now?" Before anyone could offer theories, a new transmission cut through the confusion, a direct communication from the Harvester itself. "This is Commodore Cale Dre of the Marauder Collective, to all vessels in the Vexus system." The message began the familiar voice, now carrying an unfamiliar tone of wonder and uncertainty. I have witnessed something extraordinary. The Biomantle is not what we believed. The Zeri are not what we believed." There was a pause, filled with what might have been the sound of someone struggling to find adequate words. "All Marauder vessels are hereby ordered to stand down," Dre continued finally. "Those who wish to leave may do so without judgment or consequence. Those who wish to stay to learn will be welcome. I am remaining. There is much to understand." Vega exchanged incredulous glances with his bridge crew. "It worked," he murmured in amazement. "Captain Hart actually did it." In the deep communion chamber of Kirvorath, the integration process was reaching its conclusion. The Biomantle slowly receded from Hart's body, reluctantly releasing its connection to her consciousness. She remained standing in the central basin, eyes closed, body swaying slightly, as she readjusted to the limitations of individual awareness. "Captain," Dr. Iyer approached cautiously, medical scanner in hand. "Can you hear me?" Hart opened her eyes, slowly blinking, as if the chamber's dim light was too bright. "I hear you, Doctor," she replied, her voice hoarse but steady. "The broadcast. Successful, beyond our expectations." Elliot answered, his own disconnection from the communion already complete. "The Marauders have received the understanding we hoped to convey. Some are leaving the system, but others, including Commodore Dre himself, have requested permission to land and learn more about the Biomantle." Hart nodded, processing this information with a mind that felt simultaneously expanded and depleted. The experience of the communion lingered echoes of a consciousness far larger than her own perspectives that spanned millennia, rather than decades, a sense of connection that transcended species barriers. "Help me out of here," she requested, extending a hand toward Ear. As the doctor assisted her from the basin, Hart noticed something unexpected. Thin traces of Biomantle remained on her skin, not receding completely, as they had during previous contacts. Iyer noticed as well, scanning the residual patterns with professional concern. The integration appears to have left a permanent marker, she reported. Similar to what we see in Dr. Elliot and the other human residents, though less pronounced. A gift, Elder Lear Vaughn explained, approaching with a reverence that made Hart slightly uncomfortable. The Mantle Network has recognized you, human captain. It will remember you even if you leave Vexus behind. And what does that mean exactly? Hart asked, flexing her fingers and watching as the biomantle patterns shifted in response to her movements. It means you carry a piece of Vexus with you, Elliot clarified. A living connection that will continue to adapt and evolve. It may manifest in subtle enhancements to your natural abilities, increased resistance to environmental hazards, perhaps even extended longevity. Hart wasn't entirely comfortable with the implications, but she recognized the change as a consequence of her choice, one she had made willingly, with full awareness of the risks. The Vigilant, she asked, turning to Zhao, who had been monitoring communications. Lieutenant Vega reports they've moved into standard orbit, now that the Marauder threat has subsided, Zhao replied. They're prepared to receive us whenever we're ready to depart. Hart nodded, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Relief at the mission's success and the prospect of returning home. Uncertainty about the changes she had undergone and how they would be received on Earth. And a surprising reluctance to leave this strange, hostile world that had nonetheless shown her a vision of symbiosis she had never imagined possible. We'll depart in 24 hours, she decided. That gives us time to establish formal diplomatic protocols between Earth, the Zeri settlements, and those Marauders who have chosen to remain. Dr. Iyer, I want comprehensive documentation of the biomantle technology for review by Earth Command and the Council. Already in progress, Captain Iyer assured her. The Zeri and Dr. Elliot's team have been remarkably open with their knowledge. Because they understand what you helped them achieve, Elliot explained. For the first time in generations, Vexus has a future beyond isolation and survival. You've opened a door that many thought permanently closed. Hart accepted the gratitude with a slight nod, still processing the enormity of what had transpired. We should contact the Council, she mentioned. They authorized this mission even if it evolved far beyond their expectations. Ambassador Kell has already begun preliminary reports, Zhao informed her. Though I suspect his account may require some supplementation to fully capture what we've experienced. I imagine so, Hart agreed with a tired smile. The Council sent us to stop a weapon and save a planet. They didn't expect us to forge an alliance that might redefine how the galaxy understands Deathworlds and their inhabitants. Perhaps they should have, Elder Lear Vaughn suggested. After all, they sent humans Deathworlders themselves. Who better to recognize the value in what others fear? 24 hours later, Hart stood on the landing pad outside Kirvorath, watching as a shuttle from the Vigilant descended through Vexus's still turbulent atmosphere. The chemical storm that had greeted their arrival days earlier had subsided somewhat, though the planet's environment remained deadly to unprotected life forms. Beside her stood Dr. Elliot Elder Lear Vaughn, and surprisingly, Commodore Dre, the former Marauder leader, now beginning his own journey of integration with the Biomantle Collective. The broadcast had affected him more profoundly than most, perhaps because he had been closest to the corrupted Biomantle during its development. You're certain about this diplomatic arrangement? Hart asked Elliot one last time. Allowing former Marauders to remain seems risky, even with the understanding they've gained. The risk is mutual, Elliot pointed out. They risk rejection, we risk betrayal. But the Biomantle connection makes deception difficult, another benefit of the symbiosis. Besides, he added, with a sidelong glance at Dre, some of our greatest insights have come from those who once opposed us. Dre inclined his head, acknowledging the point. The formerly imposing Marauder commander now carried himself with a humility that seemed entirely genuine, another gift of the broadcast experience. What I sought to control now teaches me Captain Hart, Dre explained. The irony is not lost on me, I assure you. The shuttle touched down its boarding ramp, extending to allow Hart and her team to embark. The time for farewells had come. The Council will want to establish formal diplomatic relations, Hart told Elliot and Lear Von. Be prepared for bureaucracy on a scale that might make you reconsider your decision to end isolation. Elliot laughed. We'll manage. The important thing is that Earth understands what we've discovered here, not just the technology, but the philosophy behind it. Symbiosis rather than exploitation. Partnership rather than dominance. I'll make sure they understand, Hart promised, though it may take time for the implications to fully sink in. We have time, Elder Lear Von replied serenely. Vexus has waited millennia for this moment. A few more years will not matter. As her team boarded the shuttle, Hart took a final moment to observe the strange hybrid settlement that had grown around the ancient Earth vessel, Zerii organic architecture, seamlessly integrated with human engineering, creating something entirely new, yet harmonious. It was, she realized, a physical manifestation of the philosophy Elliot had described, neither species dominating the other, but both contributing their strengths to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. Safe journey, Captain Hart, Elliot said, extending his hand. As they shook, Hart felt a slight resonance between the biomantle patterns on her skin and a recognition between kindred adaptations. This isn't goodbye, she replied with certainty. It's the beginning of something much larger. Aboard the shuttle, as it ascended through Vexus's atmosphere toward the waiting vigilant Hart, found herself already composing her report to Earth Command and the Council. How could she possibly convey what they had discovered? Not just a new ally or a new technology, but a new paradigm for understanding humanity's place in the galaxy. Earth was considered a death world, by Council standards, a harsh, unforgiving environment that had shaped its dominant species into resourceful, adaptable survivors. But Vexus had shown Hart that such worlds didn't just forge strength through adversity, they created opportunities for symbiosis that gentler worlds might never need to explore. Perhaps that was humanity's true value to the galactic community, not their military prowess or technological innovation, but their understanding of how to thrive in harmony with environments that others considered hostile. Not conquest, but coexistence. Not exploitation, but partnership. As the shuttle docked with the vigilant lieutenant, Vega was waiting to greet them. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of the biomantle patterns visible on Hart's skin, but his military discipline quickly reasserted itself. Welcome back, Captain, he said formally. The ship is ready to depart on your command. Thank you, Lieutenant, Hart replied. Set course for Earth. We have a rather extraordinary report to deliver. On the bridge, as the Vigilant broke orbit and prepared for the jump to FTL, Hart took a moment to observe the planet below, a swirling maelstrom of lethal storms and caustic chemicals that somehow harbored one of the most remarkable civilizations she had ever encountered. The Council called it a death world, she murmured. They were wrong. It's a world that taught its inhabitants the true value of life. As the ship accelerated away from Vexus, Hart felt the biomantle patterns on her skin pulse, once a farewell, or perhaps a reminder that part of her would always remain connected to the planet and its people. She had come as a military commander on a rescue mission, but she was leaving as something more, a bridge between worlds carrying understanding where once there had been only fear. And in that moment, Captain Elena Hart knew that the humans hadn't simply reached Deathworlders. They had found kindred spirits in the most unexpected of places, forging an alliance that would reshape the future of both their species and perhaps the galaxy itself. Not through military might or diplomatic maneuvering, but through the simplest and most profound of revelations that true strength comes not from conquering hostile environments, but from learning to thrive in partnership with them. The dangerous ship they had sent had indeed changed everything, just not in the way anyone had expected.